Okay, continuing on with this bookshelf tour. I'm sitting now where I do a lot of my reading, and so the books closest to me here are the ones that I've been consulting the most recently. And they're all about ancient Greece. So yeah, let me get started here. So the first one is Donald Kagan's New History of the Peloponnesian War. So the first volume is the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War. We have the Archidamian War, which is about the first 10 years of the Peloponnesian War. The Peace of Nicaeus and the Sicilian expedition, the disastrous Sicilian expedition. And then the fall of the Athenian Empire. This is a great work of scholarship. I will say, though, it's not something I feel provoked to reread, because at times it's a bit of, I won't say a slog. How do I phrase it? I'll say what I admire first. The scholarship here is top tier. It took Donald Kagan about the same length as the Peloponnesian War, I think, to write this work of scholarship. And it illuminates so much of Thucydides and this particular time period in Greece, a war which, as Thucydides says, no part of the Greek world was not affected by. But as much as I admire the scholarship, Kagan's writing, his writing is reminiscent of the great 19th century German scholars. Very exacting. It's I won't soften my words and just say I don't think he's a particularly engaging writer. That's not fair. I don't know. The thing about someone like Francis Parkman is, well, say what you will about his scholarship, but in terms of readability, it's a perfect, Francis Parkman or William H. Prescott for that matter, are perfect examples of competent, hardworking historians who are exceptionally talented at writing, and never forget that history is meant to engage, and I would say entertained, but maybe I am saying that. So I admire this work, but I don't feel the urge to reread it. But it has been crucial in my understanding of the Peloponnesian War. So if you're someone who's read Thucydides and has a broader knowledge of ancient Greece, if you don't already know about this work, you should read it. It is fundamental to understanding that time period. So, yeah. And though I don't feel compelled to reread it, I do consult it. I do go back to certain, if I'm thinking about a particular event in the Peloponnesian War, let's say I want to, go back to an analysis of Pylos and Sphacteria, then I'd go and see what Kagan said about it. Because again, the scholarship is incredible. Here we have Russell Megg's The Athenian Empire. I would say that this is the standard work in English devoted to this subject. This came out in 1975. Next, we have an author whose name I literally have no idea what to do with. This is one of the most insane author, scholars love to do initials like EW something or HF something, and this is just an incredible version of that scholarly trend. And this is a book from 1970, mid-1970s. This is The Origins of the Peloponnesian War. I love scholarly debates. I love reading very talented scholars disagree with each other. And one of my favorite subjects to read about is the origins of the Peloponnesian War. And this is a very important work in that area of Thucydides studies. So, yeah, okay. This next one here is, this is The Awakening of the Greek Historical Spirit by Chester G. Starr, who we'll see another book from soon. There he is. I love, if it's not already evident on this bookshelf tour, it will be more evident later on. I love not just reading history, but reading books about history itself, particularly at least of the Greeks. What do I mean by history itself? I guess historiography. What is what I mean? And this is a book about that period in Greece where the concept of history as we understand it began. And I love the way it's. I love to tell this book, The Awakening of the Greek Historical Spirit. This is The Spartan Regime by Paul Rahe. This is of a broader work that this author is, I believe, still in the midst of, titled The Grand Strategy of Classical Sparta. So he did a book called, he did a book called The Persian Challenge. It's all about looking at what are the Spartans intending, like, I mean, it's right there in the title, The Grand Strategy. What's their game plan? What's their end plan? Anyways, he did The Grand Strategy of Classical Sparta, The Persian Challenge. Then he did the First Attic War, the Second Attic War, the Sicilian Proxy War, and the Third Attic War. And I think the Third Attic War came out in 2024. That rhymed. I've not read the whole of the Grand Strategy of Classical Sparta. I do intend on doing it, just not yet. I've read an absolute mountain of books on ancient Greece, and particularly of the Peloponnesian War, and so maybe in a few years I'll read the whole of the Grand Strategy of Classical Sparta. But this is volume 1. This is the Spartan Regime. This is 2 books by a French scholar, Jacqueline de Romilly. This is Thucydides and Athenian Imperialism. This has had a huge impact on Thucydides studies. This was originally published in France, in French, I should say. It was translated in the 50s. And again, you won't find any, ever since then, you won't find any studies of Thucydides which does not draw from this author, because she also wrote this book, The Mind of Thucydides. I believe she wrote some other works, but I don't know if they're translated. So these are the 2 that I have. Here we have an older work. This is from Harvard University Press. This is from John H. Finley Jr. It's kind of hard to see. This is his book on Thucydides. Let's see here. I'll show you the cover. There you go. I had a paperback version of this for a while, and then I eventually found this. Really good book, and has a good bibliography at the back, like an annotated bibliography. It gives you some direction from where to go after that point, after reading the book. This is a book from Oxford University Press. This is, I believe it was a textbook for a long time. This is the 5th edition. This is The Greek Commonwealth, Politics and Economics in 5th Century Athens, which I have sitting right next to Victor Ehrenberg's famous study, I shouldn't say famous, but influential study of the Greek state. So the Greek state and the Greek Commonwealth. Here we have a colony and mother city in ancient Greece. The relationship between a colony and its mother city is of deep interest to me. In the ancient Greek world, is of deep interest to me because one perfect example of the importance of that relationship takes place at the beginning of the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Corcyra, which is where the first of battles, you could say, of the Peloponnesian War truly began. Corinth goes to the Peloponnesians, particularly to Sparta, to plead for assistance, and the Corcyraeans go to Athens, and the Athens heed their call. And so, anyway, that relationship, colonies and sub-colonies, is of particular interest to me. Here we have H.C. Baldry's The Greek Tragic Theatre. And then I have Early Greek Philosophy by John Burnet. I would say that the pre-Socratic philosophers I'm much more interested in than, at least at this point in my life, much more interested in them than Plato and Aristotle. That pre-Socratic world I find very interesting. Here's just a translation I have of Thucydides. This is the first translation I ever read of Thucydides, though I've read others. I think this is the only translation of Thucydides I currently have. The one to read, or at least the one that I would recommend, I'm going to make a video on Thucydides, so I'll talk about this more, but Hackett Classics. Why am I blanking on the name? Is it Stephen Lattimore who does the Hackett Classics? I got to check that. But Hackett Classics, their translation is fantastic. But this one's great too. It's more colloquial. And it's the translation that I first fell in love with Thucydides. This is translated by Rex Warner. Yeah, Rex Warner. And it's got notes by Moses Finley, who is a great, great scholar, and we'll see more of later. We have some Aristophanes. I just have Lysistrata, another plays. I have The Birds and other plays. And then I have The Frogs and other plays. And then I have the University of Chicago Press Complete Greek Tragedies. So Aeschylus, Sophocles, and then 2 volumes of Euripides. So yeah, this is usually in a box set. I don't have the box set. I think when I got it, it immediately fell apart, so I just have the volumes. Yeah. Okay, continuing on, we have the invention of Athens, the funeral oration in the classical city. The funeral oration was given at the end of each year to honor the dead, those who had died that year, fighting for the city. And the most famous example of that is the speech that Pericles gives at the end of the first year of the Peloponnesian War, when he praises the Athenian democracy and explains to the citizens listening what these men died for, those who had died fighting in the first year. And so, yeah, this is something I recently got, and because I wanted to understand this funeral speech tradition more. I've not yet read it. There's another book that's really expensive to buy on its own, so I'll probably read it from the library, but it's called, what's it called? I think it's just called The Tradition of Funeral Speeches in Athens. Is that it? I can't remember. I'll find the title and I'll list it. But that's another book on this subject that I want to get. Next book here is a book by Paul Cartledge. This is Sparta and Laconia, a regional history, 1300 to 362 BC. 362 BC is when the Battle of Mantinea happened, and the Spartans were truly defeated. Laconia is the surrounding area of Sparta, which the Spartans held in constant terror. The Helots lived there. And that tension between the Spartans and the Helots is very important to understand, because it gives you deep insight, and I guess you could say the grand strategy of Sparta. Because you begin to notice an unwillingness of the Spartans to send a full-blown Spartan army with a king at the head of it far from Sparta, because the threat of a Helot invasion was always present. There was a terrible earthquake in 462 BC. Do I have that date correct? When there was a great 464? 464? Sometime in the mid 460s. There was a great earthquake which affected the Peloponnese and severely damaged Sparta, and there was a great revolt of the surrounding area around Sparta, the Helots, and the Sparta had to ask for the help of all the other Greek city-states, or at least the notable ones. Even Athens went to send help. And so anyway, this book is what I was looking for understanding that relationship between Sparta and its immediate geographical surroundings. So yeah, and the font for this is like pretty interesting. So yeah, Paul Cartledge is probably the foremost scholar of ancient Sparta living today. Here we have a book by Michael Squire. This is from Oxford University Press, published in 2010, I believe. This is The Art of the Body, Antiquity and Its Legacy. Okay. Next, we have two books by Peter Green. We have his first is quite notable Biography of Alexander the Great. This is published in I think 1973. Is that right? 1970 actually. And then in the 90s, early 90s, this came out, Alexander to Actium, which is probably the most thorough overall treatment of the Hellenistic age. And the Hellenistic age takes place basically from the death of Alexander to the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty. So that's why it's Alexander to Actium. Actium is when Cleopatra was defeated with Mark Antony. And this covers all aspects of Hellenistic civilization. And so if you want to understand the time period, this is a book to have. This is a book to have on your shelf. Okay, next is a book that came out last year. Yeah, last year. This is from Oswin Murray. And when I saw this book, I was like, oh my God. When I saw it, I realized that this was a book that needed to exist and just hadn't yet. I'm so glad that Oswin Murray took up this quite large subject. There's a lot of sources to wrap your head around. This is called the Muse of History, the ancient Greeks from the Enlightenment to the present. So how has the Greeks been perceived? How has our perception of them changed in the last few hundred years? And a subject that interests me very deeply. And I have the UK cover. The American cover does not look as good as this, which is usually pretty typical. So yeah, and I'm a big fan of Oswin Murray. So when this came out, I was just thrilled. This is a book that it's the first work of scholarship. No, it's not. It's the second work of scholarship I read about Thucydides. The first one being the John H. Finley book. But I read this book. It was published in 1907. This is by Francis Cornford. It's dedicated to Jane Ellen Harrison, if you know who that is. This is Thucydides' Myth Historicus. A very intriguing title, which Francis explains very early on in the book. And for me, this kind of, I guess you could say, opened Pandora's box a little bit when it comes to Thucydides studies. Because the natural response to Thucydides is you are so overwhelmed by his diligence of recording events and also his analysis of those events. It is overwhelming. It is so hard to disagree with him. There's a phrase that I often think of. For those who want to disagree with Thucydides, which there are plenty of valid reasons to disagree with Thucydides, at least his interpretation of events, the phrase I think of is, if you're going to go for the king, you better kill him. Basically, like, if you're going to argue with Thucydides, you better have an absolutely rock-solid argument. And this work begins to poke holes in Thucydides. So looking at particularly the origins of the war. What were the true origins of the Peloponnesian War? How the portrait of the politician Cleon, who Thucydides refers to as the most violent of the Greeks. Thucydides is very, I'll use the word, sketchy recounting of the Spartan disaster at Pylos. When you read these events from Thucydides, it is just, it's, again, the term I'm going to use is overwhelming, is because it's just he is so exact in his recounting and his analysis. But this book made me aware of the arguments, I won't say against Thucydides, but, I guess arguments against Thucydides' interpretation of events. And the thing is that this book, though scholarship has moved beyond all the arguments that this book raises are all still valid. The conclusions, however, I think most scholars nowadays, scholars of Thucydides, would not agree with the conclusions. And but nonetheless, despite that fact, this is an incredibly provoking book to read. It will make you think about Thucydides. That's for yourself, like in terms of, how do I explain it? I guess, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Just thinking of Thucydides for yourself, like, okay, yeah, that reasoning behind the war starting, yeah, that doesn't seem quite convincing. Might be some more complex factors going on here. There's an awful lot of chance involved in the Pylos accident. And again, even though the conclusions we've moved on from them, the questions are completely valid. And so I adore this work of scholarship. And you can read this online for free. I will link it below. You can read it on archive.org. Can you read it on Project Gutenberg? I think so. I think you can do it on Project Gutenberg and archive.org. So yeah, this is Thucydides Myth Historicus. I'll show the front page here real quick. There you go. Okay. Here we have the lyric age of Greece. This is Greece, particularly in the 7th and the 6th centuries BC, right? Basically up until the Persian War begins. And this is probably one of the more definitive books on this particular period in English. So yeah, this is, if you're interested in that time period, get this. This is Chester G. Starr. He did the Awakening of the Greek Historical Spirit. This is the origins of Greek civilization, 1100 to 650 BC. This is another one of my recent buys. I've not yet read this, but I wanted this book for a while, finally found it. There's another book I want called The Coming of the Greeks, the Indo-European Migrations in the Aegean. So going back way deep into the Bronze Age, when, in ancient Greece, the ancient Greek writers were aware of, there was the native Ionians, who were predominantly in around Attica and Western Turkey, in the islands. And then there was the Peloponnese. There were, I'll just use the term Helots. They were there for a while. And then the Dorians came, the Dorian Greeks. They invaded. Thucydides makes, even mentions these invasions that go deep, deep into the past. And so I want to learn more about that. So I got this. I have not read it yet. And I want to get that other book. So the next book here is Moses Finley. Again, great scholar. This is Early Greece, the Bronze and Archaic Ages. This is a hardback from this Norton series, which we saw some on that shelf over there. And the Greek Tragic Theater. Same publisher. Again, they published a lot of great stuff in that series. Here we have the Athenian Trireme, the history and reconstruction of an ancient Greek warship. My interest in this book is twofold. One, the source of Athens' power was their navy. They were effectively an island on land because the city of Athens was connected to their port, the Piraeus, by these long walls. And they were able to spread their influence abroad through the power of their navy, to Sicily and all the way to the Black Sea. And their navy was comprised of these ships called triremes. You can kind of see it there. So I want for my own historical understanding, I wanted this book. And then on a more personal reason is because I used to row. I was a rower in college. I was bow seat. And well, I'll just say why I got into rowing. I got into rowing because for many years I was doing weightlifting, and I became increasingly bored with it. I got very bored of weightlifting, and I thought, well, what's the point of accruing all this strength if I'm not using it for something? I wanted to challenge myself, so I signed up for the rowing team, and was quickly humbled. I thought, oh yeah, I'm really strong. This would be nothing. And I had never, while being on the rowing team, I hadn't pushed my body to limits I never thought possible, and both mind and body. Anyone who's been a rower knows the absolute excruciating pain of the 2,000 meter erg test, where a rowing race is 2,000 meters, and on the erg is the rowing machines you see in gyms. And if you've ever been on a rowing team, the ultimate test is how fast you can row 2,000 meters on that machine. And yeah, I had done those tests, and immediately after completing them, I black out for 10 seconds. That's to the level I was pushing my body to become a better rower. And then I loved the time I spent out on the water rowing in the boat. And it is such a difficult sport. It requires everything you have, mentally and physically. Every ounce of mental and physical strength is required to row. And so I think when I read about an ancient Greek naval battle, and these triremes colliding with one another, and hoplites jumping on onto other ships, I think of the rowers. I think of the excruciating pain that they would have to go through to get from one place to another in the Mediterranean, particularly if they're responding to a disaster of sorts. When relief forces are sent out, how hard those rowers had to row. And so yeah, that's the more personal reason why I wanted this book, is to understand the ship itself, which this book is about scholars reconstructing that ship, literally reconstructing it. and so I want to understand that, and then also just I want to understand the absolutely grueling rowing voyages that the rowers underneath in the ships would have to go through in these great naval battles. Anyway, and then the last book here on this shelf is it's this. This is Greek historical writing by W.P. Henry. I mentioned earlier on that shelf of this publisher called Argonaut, the Argonaut publisher of Chicago, and this is another one of their books. Here is a bunch of other titles on the back. Yeah, another, like the book, The Awakening of the Greek Historical Experiment. I got this book because I want to understand Greek history writing. And this is a study of Xenophon, looking at Xenophon's treatment of the Hellenica as a way of understanding Greek historical writing of the 5th century BC. Okay, that's this shelf here. I'm going to go on the other side here, and because this is the top of a bookshelf. So I'm going to cut over there now. Okay, continuing on now. I'm on the floor, as you can see. So here next we have the great I guess you could say Victorian, late Victorian scholar Jane Ellen Harrison. I'll show you the first work. Here's her first work. I never know how to correctly pronounce that. And then same goes for this. This is her last two works. So I have all of her writings on Greek religion as far as I'm aware of. She was deeply influenced by The Golden Bough by Sir James Fraser, and which led her to examining Greek religion in that same manner. So this is a very famous work of scholarship. Virginia Woolf references her in A Room of One's Own. And that was my first time encountering Jane Ellen Harrison, is actually Virginia Woolf referencing her. These next books are from a Swedish scholar named Martin P. Nielsen. So the first work here is The Mycenaean Origins of Greek Mythology. I'm sorry for, again, dramatic lighting. I'm working with what I can here. I have a history of Greek religion. We have, let's see here. This is Greek folk religion. And finally, Greek piety. I'm missing one more work from this author, titled Greek popular religion. That's one of the titles that I keep in the back of my head and look out for in bookstores. Okay, next we have here a book I recently got. I've been searching this for a while, and I was able to bargain with a eBay seller. This is The Homeric Gods, the Spiritual Significance of Greek Religion. Martin P. Nielsen said that this book was absolutely delusional. But Edith Hamilton was a fan. This author also wrote a work called Dionysus, Myth and Cult, which I want. I'm really, really happy I got this. Been looking for this one for a while. Next one is a book by W.K.C. Guthrie. This is what I'm talking about, these scholars. They love initials. This is The Greeks and Their Gods. I believe it's a standard work on the subject. And then here I have a book, The Heroes of the Greeks. This author published extensively on Greek religion. I have one more book from this author. He also wrote a book called The Gods of the Greeks. I'm getting hypnotized here by this cover. He also wrote a work called, I think it's one of his more popular books, Um, it's Dionysus, archetype of indestructible life, or something like that. Well, here's his other book. This is, can you see this? This is Eleusis. Let's see here. Archetypal image of mother and daughter. Yeah. Which is about one of the most mysterious religious festivals in the ancient world, the Eleusinian mysteries. Many notable people participated in this event. These ceremonies that occurred at Eleusis. Eleusis is located between Athens and the area around the ancient city-state of Megara, the Megarid, and the participants of the Eleusinian mysteries, well, from what we know, had to swear to secrecy. They could never discuss it. So it was a festival, a religious festival in the ancient world where everyone who participated was sworn to secrecy about what occurred there. We have some ideas of what happened there. This is one book on them. There's another book that I don't have called Eleusis and the Eleusinian Mysteries. I need to get. Who are some people? Cicero participated, if I remember correctly. The Emperor Julian, and others. Here we have a book I recently got because I've been looking for this for a while, and I finally got a copy at a really reasonable price. This is Python, a study of the Delphic myth and its origins. Yeah, you can see that there. I'll show you the front cover. 1 second here. There we go. And I can't really talk much about it because I don't know the full extent of what's covered in here, but it's I got it because I'm for some reason this year I been really interested particularly in the Pythia, which is the priestess at Delphi, the oracle at Delphi, and I've been collecting books on that subject, and this is one of them. But Delphi had a founding myth of Apollo slaying a gigantic python, and this book looks at that myth and its origins. Okay, here we have an anthology of ancient sources on Greek sports. There you have a discus thrower. This comes from University of California Press, and they do a bunch of anthologies of ancient sources similar to this one on various ancient themes, and I wanted this one on ancient sports. Here we have Greek athletics and the genesis of sports. Again, going back to that bookshelf back there, this all ties in with the Greek concept of agon. So that's why I have these two books, and then this one as well. This is Athletics in the Ancient World. So, so that's... Oh, wait, I got more here. This is a book I referred to on when I was on that bookshelf over there. This is Jakob Burckhardt's Lectures on the Greeks and Greek Civilization. This book is incredibly illuminating. And the lectures are, again, they date to around the 1860s, 1870s. And it's important to note, I just want to make a note here, that despite this being an older work of scholarship, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say there's a tendency for people to think that they just want the latest scholarship on historical subjects, which I totally understand. Especially if you're, writing a paper or writing a book, it's important to know where the field currently is. But for more, I guess you'd say casual readers or non-scholars, don't discount older works of scholarship like this one or Edward Gibbon or Theodore Mommsen just because it's old. It's important to note that the only thing really that Jakob Burckhardt did not have access to that we have access to is predominantly archaeological data. The ancient sources largely have not changed. He's working with the same ancient sources literary sources, that we have today. And his observations are incredibly poignant and illuminating. And so this covers ancient Greek civilization from the Homeric age, the Dark Ages of Greece, to the Hellenistic age. If you're interested in the Greeks, and you're at, doesn't matter what stage of knowledge you are in that period, I highly, highly recommend this book. And it's edited by Oswin Murray, who wrote the book The Muse of History. And he does a great introduction to this work. Highly, highly recommend this. Okay, that's the first shelf here. Okay, moving to the next shelf here, we have the poems of Hesiod. This is translated by R.M. Fraser, again with those initials. This is currently the only Hesiod I have. I had the Lattimore translation for a while, but I got rid of it. Wish I had it back. Probably keep my eye out for that translation. For those who don't know, Hesiod is one of the earliest Greek poets who we have a large... Well, I would say he didn't write a whole lot, but we have a lot of it, if not all of it. I'm not totally familiar with the textual tradition of Hesiod, but he is from the 7th century BC. Right? I should know this off the top of my head. 7th century? I don't want to say 8th century. That's too early. 7th century. Right about the time that the poems of Homer were being compiled. Homer and Hesiod are usually sort of lumped together in a way, but the Homer dates back to a much farther antiquity, whereas Hesiod is very much of his own time, of the early archaic age of Greece. And so, yeah, he's a very, very important Greek poet to be aware of. This is the World of Odysseus. This is in print today as it's in print with NYRB Classics. And this is a classic of scholarship about the early Greece, the Homeric world. This is M.I. Finley, great scholar. This is the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Epic tradition. This is a Doubleday Anchor paperback. I love this publication series. I love these little paperbacks. We'll see more of them. Here we have Homer and the Heroic tradition. I had this as a hardcover for a while, and then I got rid of it, and then I found it again as a paperback, and I felt drawn back towards it, I guess. Anyway, this is The Greeks Overseas. This is a Pelican classic. It's by John Boardman, who did the book The Diffusion of Classical Art in Antiquity. And I'd been searching for this book for a while, and I eventually found it in very good condition. So this is a recent find, so I'm very happy about it. This next book, I checked out from the library 3 times before I found my own copy. I never expected to find my own copy, but I got very lucky. This book is Early Ionian Historians by Lionel Pearson. I found this at the Brattle Bookshop in Boston on the third floor where the more expensive antiquarian books are. Anyway, the reason why I had checked this out from the library so many times is because, well, for the longest time, I was working on a video titled The Lost Works of Antiquity, The Remains of Antiquity, which grew out of proportion. My notes for that video became unruly and I overwhelmed myself in the subject matter. But I was making a video on around 10 works from the ancient world that we know of that are lost. And one of them is one of these early Ionian historians. So these early Ionian historians are sort of the precursors of the Greek historian Herodotus. So end of the 6th century BC, beginning of the 5th century BC, when this historical attitude arose out of the Ionians, the Western Turkey and Attica and Boeotia. Well, not Boeotia, but anyways, one of the precursors whom Herodotus names is Hecataeus of Miletus. And Hecataeus wrote 2 works. One's called the Periegesis, and then there's the genealogy. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've read about Hecataeus, but I was starved for information about this particular early historian whom I wanted to discuss in a potential video, and this is one of the few. This book has a chapter on him as one of the few treatments of Hecataeus in English that I'm aware of. In German, it's a different story. The Germans, their Greek scholarship is top tier, and so when I found this, I was so happy. I never expected to find a copy of this, especially with the dust jacket in immaculate condition with the plastic mylar cover. So yeah, and Lionel Pearson, we'll see more of him. He was a great scholar. This next book is Herodotus, the Father of History by John L. Myers. There we go. It's not already evident. I'm a Herodotus superfan. I did a whole video on him. If I were to do that video now, it would be probably much longer. And yeah, it'd be much longer. I love reading about Herodotus. I love rereading Herodotus. I've totally examined his life and times, or at least what we can know of his life. And this is a very good book in scholarship on Herodotus. Speaking of which, here is another book from Oxford that I got at an outrageously low price. This is The Historian's Craft in the Age of Herodotus. Another one of those books that I would go to the library for, but then somehow I found this for $5. These are the kind of these books. If you see a book like this, these Oxford books with this kind of like layout design, at a bare minimum, they're usually $100, brand new. And I found this in brand new condition for $5. I could not believe it. So yeah, another book on Herodotus, and also there's a it's a collection of chapters by various scholars, and there's another book, there's a chapter in there on Hecataeus. I referred to this book earlier on in the bookshelf tour. This is Xenophon's Hellenica. Books keep falling. This is, again, I cannot praise the Landmark series enough. I read, as I said before, I read Herodotus, Thucydides, then I read Xenophon, and I'll say just unimpressed. I didn't quite like Xenophon at first. I of course liked the Anabasis, but I did not like the Hellenica. All I could think about was how much I missed Thucydides when I read the Hellenica for the first time. I should mention that the Hellenica, the Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War covers from the outbreak from around 431 to 411 BC, so he covers the first 20 years. But the war went to 404 BC, so the last 7 years are not covered by Thucydides. But Xenophon, who knew Thucydides personally, at least we have reason to believe, picked up where Thucydides left off. And he covers the last 7 years unbelievably quickly. His work is the Hellenica is like half the size of the history of the Peloponnesian War, and yet it covers from 411 BC to 362 BC, or thereabouts. A huge span of time. And so all you can think about is how much you miss Thucydides. And that's not fair to Xenophon. That's not fair to Xenophon. And there are aspects of Xenophon, things that Xenophon records, that are Thucydides does not put in his narrative. Particularly things like, I'll say, like religious aspects of the time period. Like when, before a Spartan king would set out, he would sacrifice at the border of Sparta, make a sacrifice, and if the omens were good, they would take off. Things like that. Those are stuff like that is mentioned in Thucydides, but not to the extent at which Xenophon records them. I also had a bit of a more personal distaste for Xenophon because, though he was an Athenian, he was a bit pro-Spartan. He was a friend of the king Agesilaus, the last great Spartan king. And I thought, you traitor! You're a traitor to Athens. That's not fair. Not fair. Not a fair characterization. And when I read this book, when I reread the Hellenica, I loved it because you have the introduction, you have the notes, you have the maps, you have the essays at the end. It's I have a very sentimental reason or sentimental love, I guess, for this particular volume. It changed my mind about Xenophon. So yeah, I love this edition. Here is this is from the Aris and Phillips classical texts, and this is the Hellenica Oxyrhynchus. I believe I'm saying that right. And this is let's see here. Let me find a good example. You see that? It's dual language. The Hellenica Oxyrhynchus. It gets its name. So Hellenica is like Greek history, and Oxyrhynchus is the name of the place where this Greek history was found. It was found in a collection, an ancient garbage dump of papyrus in Oxyrhynchus in Egypt, which was discovered about 100 years ago, or early 20th century. And the Hellenica Oxyrhynchus, the person who wrote it is often referred to as the H historian or the Oxyrhynchus historian, because we don't know exactly who wrote this work of Greek history. It's a fragment of a larger work. And the thing is that this work was written by a contemporary of Xenophon and Thucydides. And this work does what Xenophon does and picks up where Thucydides left off. And the thing is that this, another thing is, there's many things, is that this historian he's not Thucydides, but he's close to the caliber of Thucydides. And the fragments that survive are a great way of testing the historical accuracy of, I won't say accuracy, but the testament of Xenophon. And there are some candidates for who this historian is. There's 3 that come to mind. There's a historian named Theopompus, who we know of, and we have fragments of, but not a lot. We know he wrote a big historical work of that time period of Greece. Then there's Critippus, another contemporary of that time that we know of, but we have just mere fragments of. And then there's a later historian at the 4th century BC, or like, I can't remember exactly Ephorus's, when he was born and when he died, but he's one of the candidates, but I don't know of many proponents of his candidacy for being the H historian. So yeah, Theopompus, Critippus, Ephorus are candidates for the H historian, but we don't know. We don't know. And it's so tantalizing to know that, anyway, going back to what I said earlier about Hecataeus, if I could snap my fingers and have another work of the ancient world complete, I want the H historian. I want to know who this is, and I want to see the full work. So yeah, so this is just, this publishes this edition has, does it have an, I can't remember, does it have an essay? Yeah, it has an introduction, and notes, some maps, and it has the Greek text and the facing page translation. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna readjust my leg here because it's falling asleep. Peter Green, who I mentioned earlier, who did the Biography of Alexander and the History of the Hellenistic Period, the book called Alexander the Actium, he did a translation of a particular section of Diodorus Siculus. So this is the Persian Wars to the Fall of Athens. This is books 11 to 14 of Diodorus Siculus. It's important to note that when you say books in reference to ancient writers, it's probably more akin to the modern day term of chapter, because that's how ancient works were divided into books. So, this particular period of... I should first say who Diodorus Siculus is. So he was a 1st century BC historian. He wrote in Greek, and largely the contemporary of Julius Caesar. And if I remember correctly, he lived in Sicily. Is that right? I have to fact check myself. I have read not all of Diodorus Siculus. I've read a huge chunk of his, mainly his account of the last 4 books of his surviving work. The total work, I think, was 40 books. We have the first 5. We don't really have books 5 through 10. And then we have books 10 through 20. I think that is what survives of the total 40 books. And Diodorus Siculus provides our only complete narrative of the period between the end of the Persian War and the beginning of the Peloponnesian War. The 50 years, as they're known. There's a Greek word for it that I never know how to pronounce. It's like the Pentacatacia. I'll put it on the screen. I don't remember exactly what the pronunciation, or how to pronounce it off the top of my head. Anyway, a very important source. I mentioned earlier a scholar named Theodore Mommsen, who wrote a history of the Roman Republic. If I remember correctly, Mommsen hated Diodorus Siculus. He wrote this scathing paragraph that he wrote about Diodorus Siculus. It made me laugh. Diodorus Siculus's work was called the Library of History. That's the English language translation. Or sometimes it's just referred to as the library. What's tantalizing to know is that up until the last known full edition of Diodorus Siculus, I believe, was in the fall of Constantinople. There was a complete set of him, or the complete Diodorus Siculus. I remember reading that somewhere. So up until the 15th century, we had all of Diodorus Siculus, but now we have books 1 through 5, and then books 10 through 20. So a little less than half, which is, I know it's sad to think that it made so many centuries, but it didn't make it all the way to the present day. Anyway, I am talking way too much. This bookshelf tour is going to take forever. This is a recent book. This is from Harvard. Is this Harvard? Yeah, Harvard University Press. This is A Father, a Son, and the Rise of Athens. And the father is Miltiades, who was the one of the generals at the Battle of Marathon, and he is most famously known as the person who convinced the war council, particularly the war archon, to fight the Persians at Marathon. So the victory of the Greeks over the Persians at Marathon is because of Miltiades, and the son is Cimon, who's one of the most foremost Athenians of the 5th century BC. And also he was Themistocles' why is it so hard to find words right now? Cimon was the political opponent of Themistocles. But what's an interesting fun fact, Miltiades and Cimon, is that Thucydides, we have reason to believe that Thucydides was related to Miltiades. Thucydides' father's name was Elorus, which is a Thracian name. Thrace is, if you look at a map, it's like a map of the ancient world. It's to the east of Macedonia. I'm trying to remember this correctly. Miltiades took a Thracian wife, and then basically I can't remember the exact genealogy, but Thucydides is most likely related to the man who convinced the Greeks to fight at Marathon and to win. So that's kind of cool. Anyways, this book is about Miltiades, Cimon, and the rise of Athens. So, anyways, I'm talking way too much. This is another book by Lionel Pearson, who wrote the early Ionian historians, and this is local historians of Attica. So it covers the local chroniclers of Athens, or I guess of the broader Attica. I've not yet read this work, so I can't really say much about it. But I think we'll see one more book from Lionel Pearson here. A very often cited work of Greek scholarship. This is from the middle of the 20th century. This is A History of the Athenian Constitution to the End of the 5th Century BC by C. Hignett. This one I have not yet read, so I can't say much about it. But it's a subject that's highly interesting to me, and I feel obligated to understand it more. I read the Athenian Constitution by Aristotle, but or at least probably by one of Aristotle's students, but I have not read this. So anyway, so this next book is a book I've shown on this channel before. Another book by Paul Cartledge, who did the Sparta and Laconia, a regional history. This is Agesilaus and the Crisis of Sparta, which I mentioned in a video in 2023. I guess I don't really feel compelled to say a lot about it because I've talked about it before, but Agesilaus became king shortly after the Spartans were victorious in the Peloponnesian War, and so he ascended to that position when Sparta was pretty much at its height, or at least when it was at its most unchallenged. There was no challengers in Greece who could face them, and by the time he died, Sparta was a shadow of itself. During his reign was the Battle of Leuctra, where Epaminondas gave the Spartans one of the most devastating defeats they'd ever experienced. And then again at the Battle of Mantinea in 362 BC. And if I remember correctly, Agesilaus dies fighting as a mercenary in Egypt. So, just think about that. He was the king of the most powerful Greek city-state. That just scared me. My book falling. He was a king of the most powerful Greek city-state, and then by the end of his life, he's fighting as a mercenary in, Egypt. So, anyway, this final book here, the one that just scared me, is another book by John Boardman. This is Greek sculpture, the classical period, and there is one of the Riace warriors. Okay, that finally concludes this bottom shelf here. We'll continue on now. Okay, so going on to the next shelf here, we have another book by Ian Jenkins, who did the two books that we saw earlier. He did the books The Parthenon Sculptures and The Parthenon Frieze. This is Greek architecture and its sculpture. This is published not by the trustees of the British Museum, but published by Harvard University Press. I have too many books on Greek sculpture. This next book is a collection of fragments of lost histories of Alexander the Great. This is the history of Alexander the Great, a translation of the extant fragments, and the Ephemerides of Alexander's expedition. This is published by a publisher called Ares Publishers in Chicago. The main historians of Alexander the Great I mentioned earlier in this bookshelf tour. It's Diodorus. The first one is Diodorus Siculus, who lived basically 2 and a half centuries after Alexander. So the first, again, I repeat, the first historian we have that gives us a narrative of Alexander's life and exploits lived 2.5 centuries after him. We don't have any contemporary accounts of Alexander in full. We know of historical accounts that were written in Alexander's time or immediately thereafter, but none of them survive. We just have mere fragments. And this collects the fragments. Which leads me into... well, I should also say that the 5 authors of Alexander the Great, the ancient sources: Diodorus Siculus, Quintus Curtius Rufus, Plutarch, Arrian, Justin. Anyways, I have this book. This is the Lost Histories of Alexander the Great. And this is by Lionel Pearson, who did early Ionian historians and the local historians of Attica. And this is from the American Philological Association. And so, yeah. When I think of lost historians of Alexander, there's 2 that come to mind. There's Ptolemy, who was a very close friend of Alexander and who would later go on to found the Ptolemaic dynasty, take over Egypt as his Hellenistic kingdom. And then there was Callisthenes, who was the nephew of Aristotle. He wrote an account of Alexander as well. And it's lost. So, anyway, here we have a book by Moses Haedus. This is Hellenistic Culture. Moses Haedus translated the Homeric gods, I might add. I'll put this down here. Here we have 2 old histories from, I don't know, when was this, 100 years ago? 1927, so about 100 years ago. These are, so the first line here, this is by Edwin Bevan. This is The House of Ptolemy, A History of Egypt Under the Ptolemaic Dynasty. And he also wrote a work called The House of Seleucus. This is one of the few books, well, there are some more recent works of scholarship on the House of Seleucus, but what is it with people just not knowing the Seleucid dynasty? Or the Seleucid dynasty, I say Seleucid. Again, I could talk at length about the period immediately after the death of Alexander, the successors, all the generals who had seen Alexander's campaigns, who had been through all of it: Ptolemy, Antigonus the One-Eyed, Seleucus. What's his name? Plutarch wrote a biography of him. It begins with an E. Why am I blanking on him? Anyway, the successors are a source of endless fascination for me because they were all extremely competent at what they did. They were all incredible fighters and generals. Seleucid was one of them. So was Ptolemy. And these 2 books by Edwin Bevan cover the history of their Hellenistic kingdoms. And I might add what I said before about Jakob Burckhardt is that despite these being 100 years old, the literary sources are largely the same. So these volumes will serve you well. And they're published, again, I mentioned earlier, this Argonaut publisher. Well, this is... Oopsie, sorry. This is published by Ares Publishers. Was that a rebranded Argonaut Publishers? I don't know. This is the same publisher who did the fragments of lost histories of Alexander. But this is the Argonauts of Chicago. And there's some more works. Peter Green, his I think this is the translation that leads the field in terms of the Argonautica of Apollonius of Rhodes. Or as he refers to in his book, the Alexander to Actium, the armchair epic. Apollonius of Rhodes was one of the chief librarians of the Library of Alexandria. Speaking of Alexandria, I don't know why so much sarcasm in my voice. This work here, I'm not going to go on a rant about Oxford University Press. Okay, a little bit of a rant. As I mentioned earlier, in the previous, when I was over there, the outrageous pricing of some of Oxford University Press's books. Some of them are, if you're just an average person who has an interest in these, like scholarly subjects like antiquity or any other period, individuals are priced out of great works of scholarship, and I would think much to the chagrin of the authors. They'd want their works to be read, but I think a lot of works are not getting read because they're just so expensive to read. This particular set, I believe, in new condition, is about $1,200 to $1,600. I don't quite remember the exact number. I'm going to repeat that. $1,200 to $1,600. I don't know if that's still the same price, but I've seen it listed at that price. I was very fortunate to find this for far, far cheaper. Far cheaper. I got so lucky. And I've been searching for this work for a while. I had checked it out from the library several times, and then I came across an outrageously cheap edition. I don't even know if the seller knew exactly what they had. This is a 3-volume work. This is Ptolemaic Alexandria. This is the text. This is just notes. And this is just appendices. Or sorry, not the appendices, the index. What am I saying? Just look at that. The notes are bigger than the text. I got this book. Here's volume 1. There's Serapis. I got this book because a few years ago I read pretty much everything in English on the Library of Alexandria. And this was the last work I needed to get a full understanding of the city, at least in the time in which the library was there. The library was there far beyond the rule of the Ptolemies. It was in a constant state of degradation, basically. But when the museum was at its height, and when the great librarians lived there, like Apollonius of Rhodes, or Xenophon, or Eratosthenes, I eventually got this, but I was infuriated for the longest time because I could never. I knew I could never afford to buy this from the publisher. I'd have to find it some other way, or just have to go to the library. Which again, going to the library is not I can just read it for free at the library. So I'm making a problem for myself for no reason. But this is a book I wanted to really study, so I wanted to have my own copy. And it's by P.M. Fraser, who wrote another work called The Cities of Alexander the Great, which I would like to read. I have not read that one. Okay. Next is This is Callimachos, the Alexandrian Library and the Origins of Bibliography. Callimachos was one of the great poets of the Hellenistic period. He wrote a lot of, I think he's probably the foremost poet of the Hellenistic period, and he was a chief librarian at Alexandria. And I wouldn't say he wrote a work, but he wrote basically an inventory of the Library of Alexandria. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but the Pinakes, Pinakes. Let me just read here to you. The famous Library of Alexandria, founded around 295 BC by Ptolemy I, contained the greatest collection of texts in the ancient world and was a fertile site of Hellenistic scholarship. This landmark study of the Alexandrian Library, published in German in 1977, is available here in English for the first time. In this significant contribution to the history of classical scholarship, Rudolf Blum suggests that Callimachos of Kyrene was the second director of the Alexandrian Library, an innovative literary historian, and the inventor of two essential scholarly tools, the library catalog and the bio-bibliographical reference work. Blum traces the beginnings of textual criticism and bibliographic lists in ancient Greece and unfolds the story of Aristotle's personal library. That's quite a story there. This personal library of Aristotle, and its acquisition for Alexandria by Ptolemy II. He then critically examines the early history, administration, and the technical achievements of the Alexandrian Library. The philologists there endeavored to produce authentic texts of Greek literature by means of textual criticism and by establishing the authorship of works of doubtful origin. The library's first director, Xenophon of Ephesus, began an inventory of the scrolls that was expanded into a true catalog, the Pinakes, by the poet and naturalist Callimachos. This critical catalog recorded for each work the name of its author, data on his life, the title, the extent of the text measured in standard lines, and whether it was contained in one or several scrolls or was part of a quote-unquote mixed scroll together with other smaller works. The catalog was classified by literary genre, and the names of authors or titles were arranged alphabetically in each class. Callimachos was thus a brilliant innovator and the first to develop bibliographical tools still in use to this day. Okay, continuing onward, we have this book by Princeton University Press. This is Eratosthenes' Geography, and it's edited by Duane Roller. The fragments collected and translated with commentary and additional material by Duane Roller. Eratosthenes is one of the most fascinating individuals of the ancient world, at least in my opinion. And he is, I guess you could call him a scientist of sorts. He was many things, and he was famously known for many things. He had a nickname in the ancient world, anyway, Eratosthenes wrote a work in the 3rd century. He lived in the 3rd century in Alexandria, and called the Geographica, which was a literary work of the geography of the known world at that time. It was one of the first works of its kind. However, it's also important to note that Eratosthenes is the man who calculated the circumference of the world, of the entire Earth, to an astonishing degree of accuracy. If fans of Carl Sagan will know that in Carl Sagan's show Cosmos, he covers, I believe was it in Cosmos? There's a 5-minute clip on YouTube of Carl Sagan explaining how Eratosthenes was able to calculate the circumference of the Earth, and it's a tremendous video. I love it. I'll link it below. Anyway, this work, the Geographica, does not survive, but we know quite a bit about it from later authors referencing it, most notably Strabo, or Strabo. I don't quite know the right pronunciation for that. So we have fragments, and we have later summaries of Eratosthenes, And Princeton University Press came out with this volume which collects all those fragments, translates them with commentary, introduction, all the usual stuff, by one of the most foremost scholars of ancient geography. So this is a tremendous publication. Further proof that Princeton is one of the best university presses. This next book, this is Ancient Literacy by William V. Harris. Ancient libraries, ancient literacy rates, ancient education. These subjects I love reading about, and I'll read just about anything even remotely related to them. And this was one of the foremost books I could find on ancient literacy. I knew of it for a while. I never went out and directly sought after it, but I eventually found it. And interestingly enough is that this book has some newspaper clippings in it. And it was also somebody's review copy for a person named Carroll. This is from this is dated January 17th, 1990. The Journal of Hellenic Studies. It says, "Dear Carroll, the editors of the Journal of Hellenic Studies will be obliged if you will review the following book by the 30th of November, 1990. This is, and then W.V. Harris, Ancient Literacy. And then it asks for an upper limit of 750 words. It's suggested. There you go. So yeah, it's always cool when you find one of these old review copy books. Or like when you go to a bookstore and you find a book that interests you, and then all of a sudden a bunch of papers and articles fall out. That's always great. Okay. Here we have this slim book about one of, I guess, it's the only surviving ancient libraries, minus the fact that it's covered under a mountain of ash. Well, not mountain, but covered in volcanic ash. This is the Library of the Villa de Papyri at Herculaneum, which was covered by the ashes of Vesuvius in 79 AD. We have recovered scrolls from that library, but they're all essentially carbonized, and some have been unraveled. That unraveling process takes a long time. Some scrolls have been destroyed in that process, but now the effort has been no longer focused on physical unraveling, but digitally unraveling. So using technology to sort of layer by layer scan each of these scrolls. That archaeologists and computer scientists have been working on digitally unraveling these scrolls, and they've made some pretty big breakthroughs in the past couple of years. They've started to literally digitally unravel layer by layer each one of these scrolls. So this was in the new. This library was in the news. I think towards the beginning of 2024, there was a breakthrough. And so yeah. Anyway, continuing on, I have this book, Archives in the Ancient World by Ernst Posner. This covers archives from, let's see here. Yeah, the clay tablet archives of the Assyrians to the Roman Empire. So yeah, this is I've been searching for this book for a while, and I eventually got it. I paid more than I would have liked for this, but yeah, to be quite honest, I'm not particularly attached to this book. In all likelihood, I'll probably get rid of it, and then if I ever want to consult it again, I'll probably go to the library. Yeah, so Archives in the Ancient World. Oh, and this was published by Harvard University Press. Harvard Studies in Classical Philology, I think. Is that right? Here we have a book. This is Papyrus in Antiquity, in Classical Antiquity, by Naphtali Lewis, who has published quite a bit on Roman Egypt. And here you get some of the ancient writers, particularly Pliny the Elder, on the papyrus process. And you get the Latin and translations as well. You get the Latin with the facing page translation, and then you get chapters on papyrus. So, slim thing, pretty cool. Here we have an old book by Frederick G. Kenyon. This is Books and Readers in Ancient Greece and Rome. The in Rome part does not make it to the spine, but it also includes Rome. This author also wrote a book called Ancient Books and Modern Discoveries, which I have been unable to find at a good price. I think I've seen them, some editions go for hundreds of dollars, or some copies go for hundreds of dollars. But I'd really like to read that book. I've not yet had the chance. One day. Here we have this book by J.M. Moore. This is The Manuscript Tradition of Polybius. And I'll skip ahead here a little bit and show you my copy of Polybius. Polybius is one of my favorite ancient authors. How would I describe him? He is an absolute firebrand, and he cares very deeply about history itself. He kind of reminds me of, like, for those who know who Arnold Toynbee is, who we've talked about earlier in this bookshelf tour. He's kind of like the Arnold Toynbee of antiquity. He wants to look. He wants to broaden the scope of history. That's what he was doing, and he had a particular edge to his intention to his work. Polybius was, first off, he was what some people would describe as a man of action. He not only was, he was no, one of these historians who's confined to the armchair, but he took, what's the word I'm looking for? He participated in the events of his time, but eventually he became a captive of Rome. He was a political hostage, and there he began to understand the Roman. Not I won't say understand the Romans, but I should also mention Polybius lived in the second century BC, and right around the time that the Romans were taking over the Mediterranean world, why am I struggling so hard to find words right now? Polybius fell in with the Scipionic circle, Scipio Africanus. So he was a very highly cultured Greek among the Romans. And Polybius, he wrote in Greek for a Greek audience, and his goal was to explain to the Greeks how in just under 53 years the Romans came to dominate the whole Mediterranean world. And Polybius was a very important source for Livy. I'm going to tell you a very tantalizing aspect to Polybius. So this is titled The Rise of the Roman Empire. I don't quite agree with that title. It should be like, you could say The Rise of Rome or The Rise of the Roman Republic, not the Empire. It was not yet the Empire. But anyway, this book is Polybius. His work was 40 books, so 40 large chapters. We have books 1 through 5. We have a large portion of book 6, which deals with the Roman Constitution, and then we have parts of, I think, books 12, 13, 14. That makes up this. I repeat, the whole work is 40 books, so this is about 6.5. So we should be looking at a book about this big, or something close to that. How frustrating is that? Especially for one of the most, well, you could say, his style does not get a lot of particular praise, but his attitude, I would do anything for a full Polybius, of all of his work. I want all of it. He ranks among those works that I would, if I could snap my fingers, give me all of Polybius right now. And so, wait, I'm trying to remember. Was it 40 books? I think that's the number. Anyway, I'll fact check myself on that. The point being, we have a fraction of a much larger work, and he's a very important source. So anyway, I have this book, perfect book, the Manuscript Tradition of Polybius. So this is the kind of stuff that I was looking for. Okay. The next book I have is A Portable Cosmos. This is revealing the Antikythera mechanism, scientific wonder of the ancient world. This is a well-known ancient artifact. It's sometimes referred to as an out-of-place artifact. Sometimes it's referred to as the world's first computer. It was meant as a navigational device, dealing with celestial navigation. I've not yet read this book, and my knowledge of the Antikythera mechanism is very surface level. Usually, my knowledge is basically confined to the common knowledge. But what I do know is that this was recovered from a shipwreck in an area called Antikythera in Greece. And the shipwreck dates, I believe, to around 100 BC or thereabouts. So, and it's a Greek invention. It has Greek letters on it. But yeah, and being an engineer myself, I've been really interested in this device. So it's I'm kind of ashamed to say I have not read this yet. So yeah, let's see here. Here's a close-up image of it. Let's see here. You can see some Greek. But yeah, anyway. Okay. Next we have it's like a popular history book from like 1950s, I want to say. 1966. And this is titled Beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Heracles, I should say. The classical world seen through the eyes of its discoverers. And the Pillars of Heracles are in modern times they're referred to as the Straits of Gibraltar. So the northern part of Africa and the southern tip of Spain, where the Mediterranean Sea empties out or connects with the Atlantic Ocean. And yeah, this is just a book about ancient exploration. And right next to it, I have the first work of ancient exploration that I'm aware of. This dates to 1929. Yeah, 1929. This is The Ancient Explorers by M. Carey and E. H. Warmington. We saw M. Carey earlier with the book The Geographic Background of Greek and Roman History. You can read this for free online, if I remember correctly. It's on archive.org, I believe. I'll try to remember to put it in the description box below. But yeah, Pelican Classics did an edition of this, and I'd been wanting it for a while, and I was thinking I'd have to get like a 1929 hardcover, and then I just came across this in a used bookstore. Couldn't believe it. And it was right around the time where I was looking for it. Sometimes I have these like freaky coincidences where I'm like, oh, I discover a book, and I'm like, oh, I want that, and then 2 days later I find it. It's happened enough where it's like weird. Anyway, the next book I have is another Pelican book. This is Rome Beyond the Imperial Frontiers, a new and concise survey of Roman adventuring beyond the political frontiers of the Roman world, much of it based on the author's own explorations and excavations in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And there's our author on the back, looking quite distinguished. Yes, the ancient explorers. Yeah, so another one. Pelican books sometimes has really interesting stuff like this, the ancient explorers and Rome Beyond the Imperial Frontiers. So yeah, okay. Continuing on, I have another history of ancient geography. This dates to 1948. The Duane Roller book we saw earlier dates to the 2010s. I don't remember the year that was published. But this is 1948. And there's an even older history of ancient geography from the 19th century, which I don't have a copy of. But it's a 2-volume set. I don't remember the author's name. But there's 3 histories of ancient geography, and there's 3 histories of ancient exploration. And so I am 5 for 6. I'm just missing the one history of ancient geography. So yeah. here I have a book from an old publication called the American Geographical Society. And this is called The Frame of the Ancient Greek Maps. Slim volume. Herodotus mentions a map in his work. Trying to think of other examples. But yeah, the cartographic tradition of the ancient world is of deep fascination to me, and this is one of the few books I know of on it. The other one... Oh, and I should say, this American Geographical Society, we'll see more volumes from them right there. At the tip of this book, you can see another one. We'll see more volumes from this series. This is a great series. The other book is Greek and Roman Maps. And this is from a series called Aspects of Greek and Roman Life, which is... when was this being published? 1985 by Thames and Hudson. So like 1970s, 1980s, they were publishing these. And they did a bunch of interesting studies of the ancient world. I'm going to read a few off the back here. Chronology of the ancient world, Law and Life of Rome, the Moral and Political Tradition of Rome. I'm looking for that one. The Religions of the Roman Empire, the Family and Classical Greece, Festivals and Ceremonies of the Roman Republic, Arms and Armor of the Greeks, which I'm looking for, the Roman Soldier, Greek and Roman Technology, Early Greek Astronomy to Aristotle. We're going to see another one of these very soon. There's two books from this series that I also want. They did one called The Elephant in the Greek and Roman World, which looks at, among many other things, how to what degree did elephants play in ancient warfare. So I really want that book, which came from this series. And then another one, which I really want, and is very hard to find, as far as I'm aware of, is a book called Mining and Metallurgy in the Ancient Greek and Roman World. I think that's the full title. Mining and Metallurgy in the Ancient Greek and Roman World. One of the few books on that subject that I'm aware of. There's some other highly specialized studies of ancient metallurgy, but I want that one because it's probably the biggest survey of it that I can find. And I've been interested in ancient metallurgy, or ancient mining, because in the 5th century BC, the Athenian economy received a huge boost when silver mines were discovered at a place called Lorien. Produced a great amount of wealth. A lot of Athens' wealth came from trade, particularly in the Black Sea region and in Sicily, predominantly due to the export of things like Greek art. Athens had a lot of imports, but then eventually they found there was this these silver mines boosted the ancient. Why am I struggling so hard with words? The Athenian economy. So I'm interested in that, the role that mining played in the Peloponnesian War, because again, it also contributed to the immense wealth reserves that the Athenians had at the outbreak of the war. Additionally, the historian Thucydides, his family, which hailed from the Thracian region, predominantly, the wealth of Thucydides' family was largely due to mines in the Thracian region. So yeah, mining played a huge role in the ancient world, of course. Why wouldn't it? And I really want that book. And it came from this series, and it looks exactly like this, and it's a deeper blue. I think it's deeper blue, or maybe it's gray. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm looking for that. The Elephant in the Greek and Roman World, and Mining and Metallurgy in the Ancient World, or the Ancient Greek and Roman World. Okay. These next two books. So first I have The Extraordinary Voyage of Pythias the Greek and Pythias of Massalia, Text, Translation, and Commentary. So Pythias lived in the 4th century BC, and around 330 BC, he set out from Massalia, which was an ancient Greek colony, and that colony is now known today as Marseille in France. So yeah, there were ancient Greeks in France, and the book title here, "The Extraordinary Voyage of Pythias the Greek," extraordinary doesn't even cover it, because Pythias sailed beyond the Pillars of Heracles, Straits of Gibraltar, and he went north. And we have reason to believe he went to Britain, to Denmark. He went into the Baltic region. He potentially went all the way to Iceland. I think that's debated. But what we do know is that he saw ice. He saw ice. He was one of those people who went to faraway lands and came back with wondrous tales of unbelievable sights. And he wrote a work that no longer survives. We just have fragments and later writers writing about it because they didn't believe him, because he wrote about ice flows and they thought, this guy's full of shit. And so, that's not surprising. If you live in the Mediterranean region, it's not surprising to think that way. Pythias also wrote about, we know that he was in the Baltic region because I believe he writes about the ancient amber routes. Ancient amber was a hot commodity in the ancient world. It was used for things like jewelry. And a lot of amber comes from the Baltic region. So here is an ancient Greek living in the 4th century BC who was born in modern-day France and sailed basically far to the north to Britain, and to Denmark, potentially Iceland, and saw, it's not that the ancient Greeks didn't know what ice was, but like what he was describing was like icebergs practically. And so, yeah, extraordinary voyage. That's I guess, yeah, an understatement. And so this is Routledge Classical Translations, and so this collects all the fragments that we know of Pythias, and with commentary and introduction and stuff like that. So yeah, great stuff. Okay, continuing on, we have this work here. It's from the Hakluyt Society, and this is Agatharchides of Cnidus on the Erythraean Sea. The Erythraean Sea was the ancient name for the modern-day Red Sea. And this work comes from the 2nd century BC. But the work as this author composed it does not survive. It survives in later epitomes, summaries, which was something that authors did in the ancient world. They would do a summary of an earlier work. I mentioned an author earlier in this bookshelf tour named Justin. He is the last of the historians of Alexander the Great that gives us a continuous narrative of Alexander. But his work is not per se a genuine work by him, authentic work by himself. It was a summary of an earlier work from the 1st century BC. By a Romanized Gaul named Pompeius Trogus. So Pompeius Trogus wrote a work called the Philippic History, and the name Pompeius Trogus might not. Trogus was a Gallic name. Pompeius comes from the name of Trogus's benefactor, Pompey the Great. Anyway, that's a side note. But Justin did an epitome of Pompeius Trogus. We don't have Pompeius Trogus, but we have this Justin's epitome, so we have an understanding of what Pompeius Trogus wrote about. Same with this case. This compiles 3 epitomes of on the Erythraean Sea. One is by Diodorus Siculus, who we've seen in this bookshelf tour. Another is by Strabo again. I'll just say Strabo. That's my instinct to say. And And then another one is by a patriarch of Constantinople, I think Photius. And so this work collects those three epitomes and translates them, and then provides commentary and an introduction and whatnot. So, this is an interesting... this work gives us insight into the work done by, you could say, the like government agents of the Ptolemaic kingdom in their exploration work of the surrounding regions. So yeah, I'm glad to have this. This series does another work from antiquity. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. They do another work from antiquity, but I need to find that. Okay. The next book here is Travel in the Ancient World by Lionel Casson. This book is from the 60s, I believe. Let's see here. Nope, 1974. There's a later edition of this. This is still in print. I think there's a later updated edition. So I don't have the most recent version of this, which I probably should, but I really like this hardcover. So this is the edition I got. And Lionel Casson wrote a few other books. He wrote a book called The Ancient Mariners, which I've not read, and he wrote a book called Ships and Seamanship in the Ancient World, which I really want. Because like I said earlier in this bookshelf tour, ancient ships, ancient rowers interest me deeply. Also, I would like to learn more about the naval capabilities of the Carthaginians and the Romans, particularly during the First Punic War. Okay, the next one here is an atlas of classical history, and this is edited by Richard Talbert, who did the Barrington Atlas of the Greek and Roman world that we saw on that in the shelf over back there. Yeah, this is a great atlas to have. If I could say if there's any one atlas you should have of the ancient world, this is the one I'd recommend. And let's see here. So, I opened right up to it. Like, here's an example. They have a book called, or a map. This is a map on the ancient explorers with some commentary. And there you get the ancient explorer routes. Really cool stuff. So, yeah, highly recommend this. This is when I go to an atlas of the Roman world, I guess I could go to my Barrington Atlas, but this is the one when I'm reading ancient history and a particular author brings up a certain geographical location, I will turn to this. But I still do go to the Barrington Atlas, of course. Okay. So this next book here, this is another Pelican classic. This is The Megalith Builders of Western Europe. Yeah, this is just one of those things I found. Thought it was very interesting, so I just sort of held on to it. And of the megaliths of the Western Europe that most fascinate me, I'm interested in the oldest ones, which are on the island of Malta. Believe it or not, the oldest megaliths in Western Europe are in Malta. Probably the last place you'd expect to see structures like that, but I mean, I don't know. But yeah, if I remember correctly, it's Malta. That's where the oldest ones are. I'd love to go see those one day. But yeah, cool little book. And I love these. I love the Pelican Classic series. I love these older books, mass market books. Okay, this is another book in the American Geographical Society. This is Legendary Islands of the Atlantic, with the subtitle of A Study in Medieval Geography. So it looks at various mythical islands that are mentioned in medieval sources, and also going back to ancient sources. So Atlantis is brought up in here. So yeah, again, I love this series. Okay. This next book is I don't say controversial, but it's a discredited book. This is Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, Evidence for Advanced Civilization in the Ice Age. This written by Charles Hapgood. He wrote it. He composed this book with a team of students working underneath him, and it's an examination of a particular map, and also looks at other maps. This all stems from a map called the Papyrus map of 1513, named after its the person who put it together, the Turkish admiral and cartographer Papyrus. And this map we have. We don't have all of it. We have just a portion of it, and it was. I would say it was lost, but it didn't. It like disappeared after Papyrus's time, and then it resurfaced. I think in like 1929 or something like that, and it depicts the coast of South America or parts of South America. While I'm talking right now, I'd recommend Googling the Papyrus map, and it depicts a landmass. That almost seems akin to the way Antarctica is portrayed in our current Mercator projection of the world. And I believe the testimony of Papyrus is that it's a map that was made based off a lot of older maps. And so there's some people out there who believe that the Papyrus map shows Antarctica. Two issues with that. One I haven't mentioned yet. The one is that if what it's showing is Antarctica, which I will add, serious cartographers do not agree with that consensus, nor do archaeologists or anyone else that, I guess directly in the field, or at least today. It depicts it. Okay, let's say it's Antarctica. One problem: it shows an Antarctica that is not covered in ice. That's the one thing. The other thing is, and the larger problem, is Antarctica had not yet been discovered. So, I guess I should have reversed those two. First, it's Antarctica not yet been discovered, and yet it's depicting Antarctica without ice. I should have said it that way. But anyway, so some people believe that it shows Antarctica, but without ice. And so the last time that Antarctica was not covered in ice was, or at least sometime during the last ice age, or at least my knowledge of this is very, very surface level. I've not read this book yet. I just own it and I know about it. And it kind of it's an intersection of like ancient, well, I won't call it ancient civilization or history because there's no evidence for that advanced civilization. But it has to do with old maps and the ancient world, I guess. Anyways, the Antarctica, the last time Antarctica did not have ice on it was sometime in the Neolithic. And so, basically, taking this author with his team, basically comes to this conclusion that this map is depicting Antarctica without ice, which they could only conclude is that there must have been some sort of seafaring civilization in the Neolithic that could have mapped the coasts. That is an extraordinary claim. And this map is not extraordinary evidence, which is those two need to go hand in hand. I have yet to see a person who believes in this book to explain to me how exactly, okay, let's say there's a Neolithic civilization, or advanced civilization in the Neolithic sometime, that mapped the coast of America, or not, of Antarctica. Okay, let's say that's true. How did that information get transmitted through to Papyrus? How did that information get to him? Tell me exactly the tradition of how that knowledge was passed down. If you say, the Library of Alexandria had it, no. Well, I won't say that because I don't know everything that was in the Library of Alexandria, yeah. Anyway, I'm talking a lot about a book that I haven't read, but I know a lot about this book. I know enough about it, but it won't keep me from being curious. of course. And it's an interesting subject. It's an interesting thing to think about, I guess. The modern day proponents of advanced civilization in the Ice Age, like Graham Hancock, they, from what I understand, accept the conclusion of this book without seemingly any criticism, I guess. Anyway, that's enough about this. It's interesting stuff. It is interesting stuff. I will say that. But of course, it raises a lot of questions. I guess questions for the people who believe it. Here we have this book, Atlantis, Fact or Fiction. I'm very interested in all that is known about this idea of Atlantis. It comes from the Greek philosopher Plato. He recounts in two of his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, that what he learned through his ancestor Solon, who was a very notable Greek, I won't say philosopher, I'll say poet and statesman, had gone to Egypt. Solon had self-imposed exile on himself after he had given laws to the Athenians, and he went to Egypt and he spoke to the priests there, and they told him, this is what Plato says, they told him this about this civilization called Atlantis that lives thousands of years in the past, and as everyone knows, sunk into the sea. Anyway, the tradition of people searching for Atlantis I find interesting. I like to read about it. Going all the way back to Ignatius Donnelly, even though there's yet to be any physical evidence of such a of Atlantis, it's still interesting to read about people trying to find it. I guess I don't know. Anyway, okay. This next book here is Philology by James Turner, with the subtitle "The Forgotten Origins of the Modern Humanities." This is a great book. A great book. This is one of the best nonfiction books I've ever read, and it has. If you're someone who's interested into philology, it's a great overview of the history of the subject, of course, and also it has a lot of notes and a great bibliography. There's the text. There's the notes. So with this book, you can really go down the rabbit hole, just chasing all of the sources that James Turner uses for this book. I've read it twice, and yeah, I'm just very impressed by it. So I highly recommend this. I would say this is one of those books that I honestly wish I could recommend to everyone. I wish more people knew about philology, because it's an unbelievably interesting subject. So yeah. The next book here, this is The Medieval Library by James Westfall Thompson. And this book is fantastic because each chapter is just on different types of libraries: early church libraries, early monastic libraries, libraries of the Carolingian Renaissance, libraries of the British Isles, libraries of medieval Italy, let's see here, libraries of medieval Germany, libraries of medieval France, and it just goes on. And I had this, a few years ago, I had this idea of like, oh, I'm gonna create my own atlas of medieval libraries, and I'm gonna trace the movings of manuscripts. And I was going to use this book to do it. I didn't end up ever doing that, but I still think about it often. This I guess, this personal project of creating an atlas of all the medieval libraries, and making a record of all the known manuscripts in those libraries of classical authors. Yeah, I don't know, no further point. But yeah, a great work if you're into this stuff, and this author also wrote a work on ancient libraries, which I don't have. I haven't read yet. So I'm on the lookout for that. Here we have a history of Greek literature, and it's ancient Greek literature, not all the way up to the modern day, by Albin Lesky. And then here we have a history of Latin literature. Another great work here. Okay. So that's this shelf here. I'll now go on to the next one. Okay. Going on from here, we have Latin, a story of a world language. I've shown this book on this channel before, but it was in hardcover. This is basically a biography of Latin. Here we have Polybius, which I showed. And then here we have two biographies of Scipio Africanus. So I have this biography from 1927. This is a greater than Napoleon. You can read this for free online, I believe. Then we have Scipio Africanus, Soldier and Politician. And this is from that series I mentioned earlier, Aspects of Greek and Roman Life. And this book was by the editor of that series, H.H. Scullard. I believe this particular book in that series is harder to find. I got really lucky finding this edition, but I think it's kind of expensive online. But yeah, those are I think there might be a third Scipio biography in English. I'm blanking on the name. Here is the landmark Julius Caesar, another great publication from the Landmark series. This is, well, I won't say the collected writings of Caesar, everything he wrote. I'll say everything that he put his name on. So it has the conquest of Gaul, the Civil War, the Alexandrian War, the Spanish War, and with, of course, a great introduction, maps, essays, all the works. This is the edition of Julius Caesar to have. Nothing else compares. This is everything if you have any interest in Caesar, everything you need to know is in here. Here we have 99% of the works of Tacitus. It says the Annals and the Histories, but the Agricola and the Germania is in here. The only thing it's missing is the Dialogue and Oratory, which has Tacitus's name. And this is in the Church and Broadrib translation, which is it's an older translation. It's not perfect. It creaks a little bit, but parts of it I really like. Parts of it are really good. So yeah, this is a good, you could say, a one-volume edition of Tacitus. It's not technically a one-volume, but it's basically a one-volume. Here we have this was my my graduation present to myself. I bought this for myself when I graduated college. This is a work by, I would probably wager, the greatest Roman historian of the 20th century. This is Ronald Syme's 2-volume study of Tacitus, which he published in 1958. Just a little over 20 years after he published what he's most well known for, which is his work, The Roman Revolution, which we'll see later on in this bookshelf tour, and a work I have deep, deep admiration for. It's a book that it covers the transformation of the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. It's strictly about that subject, and yet it somehow changed my view of history entirely. Ronald Syme, he was a historian, but he was a true artist. His ability to interrogate ancient sources was an art form. He elevated scholarship to art, and at least in my view, and his prose is impeccable. It's Tacitian. It's exacting. It's precise, and can be very strange to read, but almost consistently exhilarating. And so I have a tremendous amount of admiration for him. I have the Roman Revolution, as I mentioned. I don't currently have any other works by Ronald Syme. I used to have a work called Ammianus and the Historia Augusta, which is about later antiquity. But he wrote a work called The Augustan Aristocracy, which is one of those overpriced Oxford books published by Oxford University Press. I'll eventually have to read it in a library because I won't be able to. I just could not justify buying that on its own. But a very important author to me. One of my favorite historians. Here is a work. This was published first in 1956. Well, no, it was not first published in 1956. I think it was published. It was like reprinted in this edition. This is the sixth printing from 1960 something. First published in this publisher, the Meridian Books, in 1956. But I think the work goes back potentially to the 19th century. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, this is, Roman Society from Nero to Marcus Aurelius. And there is the famous equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, which I believed only survived antiquity because people thought that this was depicting the Emperor Constantine. I don't know if that's exactly right. But yeah, this is by Samuel Dill. And then here we have Procopius. We have The Wars of Justinian. And this is translated by Anthony Caldelas, who's probably the most notable Byzantine historian and translator living today. He had a book. I have another book by him later on this bookshelf tour, we'll see. But he published a book in 2020, either 2024 or 2023, called The New Roman Empire, which is a new history of Byzantium. And I have another translation by Caldelas we'll see later on. But yeah, he is a great scholar working today. Okay, continuing on, we're almost done with this shorter bookshelf here. We're now seeing some low classical library volumes. This is the critical essays of Dionysius of Halicarnassus. And for those unfamiliar with the low classical library, you get the Greek on the one side and the translation on the other. And so Dionysius of Halicarnassus was a 1st century BC author. He migrated to Rome, I think around 30 BC. And he wrote these critical essays of Athenian orators like Demosthenes and Lysias and Isaias. And I got this particular volume. They did 2 volumes of his critical essays, but this essay has this volume has his essay on Thucydides. And Dionysius had this goal of restoring the Greek language to the glory of the classical Attic, the Greek of Plato and Thucydides and whatnot. So I have this, and then I have his major work. This is the Roman Antiquities, which was a 20-volume or 20 book that he wrote in, which had 20. It was a work that had 20 books to it, and we have the first 10 and parts of like books 11 and 12, and then fragments of like 13 through 20. And this work was meant to instruct the Greeks about Roman antiquity. This is an ancient historian teaching ancient history to his fellow Greeks to help them understand or to acquiesce to Roman rule. So, yeah, this is comparable to Livy in terms of its account of early Rome. So, yeah. Here we have another book from that Argonaut, the Argonaut publisher of Chicago. This is Ancient Ships. So just another book I have on ancient seamanship. Here we have two books on the wonders of the ancient world. So this one, The Seven Wonders of the World, A History of the Modern Imagination. And this is a more recent work. This is The Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, Science, Engineering, and Technology. So it looks at the ancient wonders of the world through a technical perspective. How did they build these things? So, okay. Here we have a work of scholarship from the 19th century, which has since become a classic. It's been ordained in one of these. This is a Doubleday Anchor book, which I mentioned earlier. This is The Ancient City, a classic study of the religious and civil institutions of Greece and Rome, by Fustel du Collage. Yeah, so next, I have more Donald Kagan, who wrote the 4-volume history of the Peloponnesian War. This is his work, Problems in Ancient History. So we have Volume 1, The Ancient Near East and Greece. In Volume 2, we have The Roman World. And for some reason, this book is double-columned all the way through for both volumes. Okay, next, we have a book here. This is, I don't know, I need to say this. We have a book here. This is Plutarch and His Times by R.H. Barrow. And so, okay, yeah, we're getting close to finishing here. So wrapping up the entirety of this particular bookshelf, we have a few poetry anthologies here. This is a modern library giant. This is an anthology of famous English and American poetry. It's edited by Conrad Aiken. Conrad Aiken and William Rose Benet. I singled out Conrad Aiken because he's a poet I do like. I've not read a lot of his poetry, but I've read a few that I've really stood out to me. And so yeah, I really like this edition. I will say I did notice a mistake in here. There's a famous poem called Sound the Clarion, and for some reason this book attributes it to Sir Walter Scott, which is not, I can't remember the actual poet's name, but it's definitely not Sir Walter Scott. So, yeah. This is my favorite poetry anthology. I have spent so much time with this anthology. This is the Helen Gardner New Oxford Book of English Verse. This poetry, I don't, will I ever see a poetry anthology better than this one? I don't know, but I love this. Yeah, I could talk about it for a while. Here is a different New Oxford Book of English Verse. This one's chosen and edited by Sir Arthur Quiller Couch. This one's good. It's really good. But it's not the one I just showed you. It's not the Helen Gardner one. Here we have the Oxford Book of Modern Verse. And this one is chosen by W.B. Yeats. So it's really interesting for that fact alone. But I've discovered a lot of great poetry from here. Yeah, so I've had a lot of good time with this volume. And then of anthology I do love as well, this is The Eternal Sea, an anthology of sea poetry. I've shown this on this channel before. I did a video last August where I read some poems, and I read out of here. Yeah, if you love the ocean, highly recommend. A lot of great stuff in here. And it has some really great illustrations. It organizes it. I don't know if you can read that there. But it organizes the poems by various themes. So the first theme is the call of the sea. Poems that are like summoning you to the sea. The second is called the building of the ship. Then there's outward bound, stormy seas, calm and sunny seas. A quote, roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll, which is a quote from a line from Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, if I remember correctly. Nautica Mystica, some more mythical kind of poems about the sea, and so on from there. So yeah, and also it has some great illustrations. Let me find one here. There's an illustration before each section. So there's Homeward Bound, Making Port. Let's see. Let's see here. Let me find some good ones. Fisherman. Oh, ghost ships and phantoms. How about that? I'll do one more here. Let's see. Let's see. Nautica Mystica. Very Coleridgean. Okay, and then the final set of books here is Macaulay's History of England. Were you expecting that? I recently picked this up. I got this set for $15. I couldn't really pass that up. I've only ever read snippets of this work, and I don't know if this work is ever read anymore. This author is known more so for a concept, less so than his writings directly. The concept that he's known for is the Whig interpretation of history. I won't exactly get into that now, but yeah. So Macaulay was one of the most famous authors of his own day, but he's not read anymore as far as I'm aware of. So yeah, that will wrap up this shelf. I think I'll break this off at the. This will be the end of the second video, and we'll continue on. Thank you for watching, and we'll get started on the next bookshelf. So yeah, all right, thanks.